Hey everybody, I am Nick. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. It is Tuesday, June the 30th. Man, I can't believe it's already, the last day of June. That just seems crazy to me. But we're here tonight to talk some Nightmare on Elm Street. I got my Elm Street hat on and I'm ready to go. I figured we've talked about Halloween a lot. And to be honest, I could talk about Halloween every damn day. I've talked a little bit about Friday the 13th, but hey, we haven't hit up the Elm Street franchise, so let's get into that. Before I get into that a little bit, though, I just want to talk a little bit about this channel. So got a lot more exciting stuff coming in the future here. So in the past, I had kind of made videos here and there. It probably averaged out every 10 days or so. But what I want to do now is I've kind of made a schedule where I'm going to have a couple of exciting things coming out every week. So every week I'm going to have a weekly ranking video and also a weekly movie review video. So I'm really not a movie reviewer technically, but I got a lot of thoughts on these movies, so I'm just going to kind of, put them out there, some positives, negatives, and then kind of my general overall thoughts on various movies. So usually the ranking videos will come out probably around Sundays, and then the movie reviews will come out at the end of the week. In addition to these live streams that I'm just going to continue to do every Tuesday night. So enough self-promotion there. Let's get into this. So what I'm basically going to do is just kind of talk about all the movies in the Elm Street franchise, give my overall thoughts, some of the things I liked and didn't like about the movies, and then just kind of talk about the future of the franchise. And then, we'll get into the Q&A in the chat room and go from there. While I'm talking, feel free to throw any questions or comments in the chat. I will scroll back and get to them all like we usually do. So let's go from there. So without further ado, let's talk about Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's talk about the OG from 1984. There's not much I can say about this movie that hasn't been said. This is just an absolute classic movie. Wes Craven was brilliant. It was kind of, a perfect storm here. What happened? You had, a killer that comes at you through your dreams. And if you die in your dreams, you die in real life. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that really hadn't been done before. So just that concept alone, especially in 1984, was kind of mind-blowing to audiences. You had great practical effects. There was obviously no CGI in 84, so they had to get creative with things. The dream sequences were based in reality, which as much as some of the dream sequences in the sequels are pretty cool, it just kind of provided a little bit more of a scarier element to me in the original. So that's one of the reasons why the original, in my opinion, is a lot scarier than some of the other later ones. Some of the history of how this film was kind of, made by Wes Craven and how he kind of came up with it is pretty interesting too. It's well known that, Fred Krueger was a bully when Craven was growing up. So that's kind of where he took the name. A lot of people don't know too, a lot of people might, but a lot of people don't know too that, the razor claw, that Freddy's glove was kind of conceived because Wes had a tree that would kind of brush against his window when he was growing up. And that kind of always scared him. So that's pretty cool how he used those real life experiences to kind of create Freddy Krueger. And as far as the dreams, well, I can't remember if it was Indonesia or something, but there were some refugees in some country. It might have been Indonesia. I could be way off on that too. But there were some refugees that an article that Craven was reading, that they were terrified of falling asleep and just terrified of falling asleep. And, they were scared they were going to die. And one of the refugees actually died in his sleep. And then they found a coffee maker. I can't remember if it was under his bed or in his closet or something like that. So that was kind of some of the inspiration that Craven took to kind of create the concept of this series and the concept of Fred Krueger and stuff like that. But a couple of my favorite scenes from the original here, obviously, number one has got to be Tina's death scene. I mean, that is just petrifying. She's on, Freddy's clawing her. You know, you don't see Freddy. You know, Rod is in bed with her, and you know, you see her skin just get cut open. She gets thrown on the ceiling. Pretty cool how they did that too, where you know, like I said, they didn't have the effects that we have today. So, you know, they actually built an upside down room where the ceiling was on the floor, you know, to create that death scene. So, you know, just awesome death scene. Even the introduction of Krueger, you know, in the alleyway, you know, he's got his arms, you know, spread out, that practical effect. You know, he cuts off his finger, you know, this is God, you know, just frightening. I mean, Freddy's really in the shadows in this first movie, which obviously in the later sequels that changes a little bit. But yeah, so that Tina death scene, it's got to be my favorite scene, if not in the franchise, definitely in this first movie. And then another scene that sticks out to me is obviously the school hallway scene, you know, with Tina in the body bag being kind of dragged along the hallway as Nancy falls asleep during class. You know, just brilliant by Craven to kind of just unsettle you. And something that later sequels are definitely missing. So that's kind of my thoughts on, you know, my brief thoughts. You know, we could get into all the great things about A Nightmare on Elm Street 94. You know, we could talk about that for hours, but that's just kind of my brief thoughts on that movie. Moving along to the sequel, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which I believe came out a year later. Kind of the black sheep of the franchise. And I'll admit that it took me a long time to come around with this movie just because there's so many weird concepts about it. You know, Freddy, you know, was invading people's dreams in the original, and now it's kind of a possession movie where he's trying to use Jesse to come into the real world. So just very bizarre kind of turn there. Obviously, this is well known for being, you know, the gayest horror movie ever made. If you guys haven't seen it yet, check out the Mark Patton Scream Queen, I think it's called, Mark Patton documentary. I just saw that on Shudder a couple weeks ago. Very interesting, very, very cool too. But so obviously there's a lot of controversy with that, and you know, the director and writer were saying it was you know, it was not intended to have gay subtext. Well, you know, clearly it was, and the fact that Patton, you know, was gay in Hollywood at that time with all the fear of AIDS and everything going on, you know, it basically, I don't want to say ruined his life, but it certainly ruined his career after that. So just a lot going on there. But you know, Freddy in Part 2 is probably, he might be the scariest version of Freddy that exists in the franchise. You know, he just looks just terrifying. You know, you compare that to some of the later sequels, and my God. But yeah, so like I said, it took me just a long time to, you know, come around on this movie. And now that I go in with an open mind, you know, I appreciate this movie for what it is. And one of probably my favorite scene, I don't want to say the franchise, but one of my favorite scenes in the franchise is that pool party massacre. You know, it's just awesome. You know, Freddy comes running out, you know, and you know, he stabs that guy. What does he say? You know, fuck, I can't remember. Go fuck yourself. It's not go fuck yourself, but it's something crazy like that. But anyway, he stabs the guy in the chest, and then you got the fire in the background, and you know, his hands up here. Oh, my children now. You know, just awesome. An awesome scene. Not a huge fan of the ending of this movie, though. You know, he was kind of defeated by love, straight love, I guess you could say. So I'm not really a fan of that. But overall, this movie has a lot of help yourself, fucker. Yes, thank you, Sociopath Survivor. Yes, help yourself, fucker. That's fantastic. Just a great line. Yeah, but thank you. That's an awesome line. But yeah, so I'm not a fan of the way this movie ended, but like I said, I really appreciate this movie now for what it is. And it's one of my go-to Freddy movies from now on. So Part 3, the fan favorite. They finally mastered all the humor that would come in the later sequels and the darkness that's existed in the first couple movies. They finally master it here. You think they'd master it for a couple of movies, but no, it went down after that, but we'll get into that. So Part 3 is a fan favorite for a reason. It's just a great movie. This is when the franchise kind of clicks on all cylinders. They realize what they have in Freddy Krueger. You got Nancy back. just the setting alone of this movie is really creepy. You got all these the last Elm Street kids, they call them. And they're all in the sanitarium kind of together, or a mental institution, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, they all kind of got a band together to stop Freddy. And it's just awesome. As far as some of the background that they started getting into about Freddy in this movie, this is where Amanda Krueger finally shows up. And the guy, that the other doctor, looks like Bill Maher. He kind of sees Amanda Krueger's ghost, I guess you could say. But yeah, so this is where the famous bastard son of 100 maniacs happens, for better or worse. As far as the way it's done in this movie, I didn't mind it. When you get into a franchise, obviously, you're going to have to divulge a little bit more into characters and villains' backstories, for better or worse. Obviously, they had to do it at some point in Halloween with Part 6 and the Curse of Thorn. They had to do it in Friday the 13th with Jason Goes to Hell. Well, they started pretty early here in Part 3 with the bastard son of 100 maniacs, which, if you think about it, is actually as much as I liked Freddy just being a dirty child killer, killing for no reason. The bastard son of 100 maniacs is a pretty damn cool concept. You got Amanda Krueger as a nun. She gets locked in a mental hospital, over, I think it's like a holiday weekend or something. And she's, raped by all these crazy people. That's horrifying. That is just, whoever came up with that, bravo. That's horrifying for this poor girl, but then, she gives birth to Fred Krueger, and she calls him they call him the bastard son of 100 maniacs. So pretty cool concept there, even though the more you divulge into these villains' backstories, the worse it gets. At least for me. I know some people love knowing all they can about these, but yeah, I just think that that's a cool concept. Another reason that separates this movie from the others is the characters. Just a great set of characters. Kincaid is one of my favorite characters in the franchise. Joey, that horny little bastard, can't help but smile thinking about Joey. And yeah, so it's just great the way they got a band together, and it's great to have Nancy back in a different role, kind of as a protector. Kristen's awesome. She's a great final girl. Patricia Arquette, before she got famous, did a great job in Part 3. And yeah, and this actually has my favorite kill in the franchise, and that is Philip. If you remember, he was the guy that liked puppets, and Freddy, kind of becomes the puppet, and is kind of the puppet master. But the twist is, instead of strings, he's guiding Philip to his death using his tendons, which is just painful to even think about. It's definitely painful to watch, and just the effects are perfect. Maybe not perfect, but considering their practical effects, I mean, that's pretty cool. So yeah, so Part 3, fan favorite for a reason. Now we get to Part 4. Everyone said this and heard this, but this is the MTV Freddy version. This is where it slowly starts going downhill. There's still a lot of redeeming qualities about Part 4. However, Freddy is standing on a beach wearing sunglasses in this movie. That image alone kind of sums everything up. But like I said, there are some redeeming qualities of Part 4. Alice is a pretty decent final girl. I like how she's kind of meek and quiet at the beginning, and then, her friends start dying. She gets Kristen's dream power. And then, she slowly becomes kind of this dream master, as the movie's called. So I thought she was a good character. I think she's underrated too. Lisa Wilcox does a great job in this movie, and the other movie too after this. But yeah, I really think that Elm Street 4, I know it's a lot of people's favorite nightmare movie. It was actually, I believe it, up until Freddy vs. Jason, it made the most money. Freddy was just at the peak of his popularity. This is when he's on kids' pajamas and toys and commercials. And, he's got Freddy's Nightmare TV series. So yeah, so Nightmare 4, I wasn't a big fan, though, that they killed off the 3 remaining survivors so quickly. Joey's death is pretty cool with the waterbed. Kristen gets thrown into the fire. Kincaid's death, even though part of it is kind of stupid, it's kind of cool with the the junkyard. You know, you kind of the camera zooms up and you see all these cars, and he's kind of trapped in there. So that was pretty cool. But other than that, you know, Freddy gets, you know, resurrected by a dog named Jason, I think as a homage to Friday the 13th. He gets resurrected by a dog, you know, pissing fire, basically, which is probably the most ridiculous resurrection of a slasher villain that I've ever seen. I don't know if they'll ever top that. But yeah, so Nightmare 4, although it's serviceable, you know, it's really when they started to go downhill. Moving forward to part 5, the downward slope continues here. It's certainly not as bad as the next one, because not many movies are, but it just really missed the mark for me. Now, I think it's a great concept that they came up with, of having Alice be pregnant with Dan's baby, and, you know, the baby, you know, Freddy invading the dreams of an unborn child. The concept alone is different and pretty cool. So I like that. However, you know, the movie is just very blah, you know, to me. One thing I did like Dan's death on the motorcycle. That was pretty cool and pretty grotesque. If you've ever seen the unrated version of that, it's even worse, as far as, you know, blood and gore and shit like that. So Dan's death is pretty cool. But the movie just missed the mark for me. One of the things I didn't like about this movie too was all the flashbacks to, you know, to Amanda Krueger again, and, you know, how Freddy was born. You actually got Robert Englund not wearing Freddy makeup, waking up in bed next to Alice. It's just stupid. And the little kid, what's his name, Jacob, her unborn child in her dreams, that is for some reason 5 years old or 7 years old or whatever in the dreams, was just stupid. There's some great visuals in the dreams. You know, you had kind of like the stairs going up and down in different directions. So that's a great visual. But what's not a great visual with that is when Freddy's chasing after the kid up and down the weird stairs. Like, that's just stupid looking. So yeah, you know, and then Freddy, you know, going, "It's a boy." Come on. I know that's kind of the tagline for the movie, but come on. That is just, you know, if you compare part 1 to this, big downhill, big downward slope there. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this movie at all. But that brings us to a movie that not only am I not a fan of, and you guys have heard me say this before, but I think this is the worst horror movie ever made. And I know that's a ridiculous statement, because there's so many bad horror movies out there, but I don't really give a shit. This movie sucks ass, and I'm talking about Freddy's Dead. My God. You know, all I need to watch is the first 5 minutes of this movie and see Freddy on a broomstick, you know, saying, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too." Oh, like, come on. You know, just awful. I didn't need to know more backstory that we don't need to know. I didn't need to know that Freddy got his power from these 3 dream demons, sperm-looking things. You know, that's just ridiculous. Worst makeup in the franchise by far. He looks like he's got bubble gum all over his face. But I'm going to try to say one positive thing about all these movies. And my one positive thing about Freddy's Dead is there is one part that made me laugh. And that's when the deaf guy or whatever is in the back of the van, and he's, you know, the map that they're looking at just is, you know, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's trying to find where they are. And all of a sudden on the map, it just says, "You're fucked." So that always makes me laugh. So I wish I could just watch that 2-minute scene for Freddy's Dead and be fine with that. It is pretty funny. But the joke is on us overall, because this movie's a big pile of dog shit. I just can't stand it. So I'm not even going to talk about it anymore. So New Nightmare came out in 1994. Yeah, it came out in 94 because Jason Goes to Hell came out in 93. New Nightmare came out in 94. Obviously, this movie's pretty meta. It's not actually Freddy Krueger. It is a demon, or some kind of demon, or, you know, some kind of ancient evil using the form of Freddy Krueger to invade the real world. Just a genius concept here by Craven. Obviously, it wasn't received well. It was ahead of its time. Craven really perfected the meta stuff when he took Kevin Williamson's Scream script 2 years later, but audiences weren't ready in 94 for this. It was kind of cool to see the characters playing themselves. You had Craven playing himself, Robert Englund playing himself, Bob Shea, obviously Heather Langenkamp playing a version of herself. So that was pretty cool. I thought this movie was actually just very like unnerving. You're just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop here, which is really cool. The actor that played Heather's child, Dylan, is obviously the kid from Pet Cemetery. He played Gage in Pet Cemetery. Another terrific job here. I think he was also in a few episodes of Full House around that time too. But he just did a great job. So as far as sometimes child actors, they can just ruin a movie. But he did a good job. It just really helped with the story, when he's watching, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, when he's on the playground, kind of reach into the sky after his dad dies. All that is really well done. Once again, the ending wasn't too great, with the Hansel and Gretel shit. I don't have an answer on what the ending should have been. I just know that it didn't really land for me. But overall, excellent movie. You got to kind of take it separate from the franchise. But I really liked what Craven came up with there. Pretty genius. Like I said, just ahead of its time, as we all kind of know by now. Which brings us to the 2009 remake. I have not heard too many positive things about this remake, and I got nothing really for you. My main issue with it was not Jackie Earle Haley's performance as Freddy. Look, nobody is going to be Robert Englund. Nobody. Okay? No matter what, no matter how good the movie was, there's always going to be people saying, I miss Robert. Well, eventually, a series like this is going to get remade, and they're going to need to go another direction. And Jackie Earle Haley was fine. I wasn't a huge fan of the makeup. I know it was more realistic than, the movies from the 80s and stuff like that. I know it was more realistic as far as like what a burn victim would actually look like. But I wasn't a big fan of it. I like the classic Freddy look. My main issue with this movie, besides fucking CGI, which just drives me nuts in every goddamn modern horror movie. But the main issue was just the characters were unlikable. We didn't get to see the characters happy at all. We jumped right into them, already dealing with this shit. So they're already kind of losing their minds. And it's hard to be attached to characters that are just unlikable. It's hard to care about Nancy's friends when they're just unlikable. I don't really have too much anything really good to say about the remake. I'm glad it was one and done. Swing and a miss. Obviously, it's been, 11 years since then, and we still haven't gotten another one. I'm not just not a fan of the remake. So that brings us to now. What does the future hold? You guys may have heard that a few months back, might have been more than a few months. This COVID shit's got my timeline all fucked up. But anyway, a few months back or longer, the rights to the franchise went back to the Craven estate. So that means Wes Craven's family owns the rights again, and they can do whatever they want to with Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street, which is pretty cool. I heard, and I don't have any details on this, but I heard Elijah Wood wants to pitch an idea for a new nightmare movie. Obviously, I think we've all heard the rumors of people wanting Kevin Bacon to play Freddy, which would be interesting, I guess. So what are their options? I guess they got a couple options. They could reboot the franchise again, which I don't think would be the worst idea at this point, because you don't want to make a sequel to the 2009 remake. Robert Englund's already stated he's too old to do it, and I agree with that. So you're going to have to probably reboot the franchise again and see. Hope you get a good script. Hope you get good actors. And hope that you get a director that knows what the fuck he's doing. So you could do that. Or do you go a delayed sequel a la Halloween 2018? So you could do it a few different ways, right? You could have a sequel to the original, which obviously the original had an ending that, they basically had two different endings, which sucked. But you could have a delayed sequel like to the original, or maybe you do a sequel to part 3. Part 3 came out in 87. So at that point, it'll be 35 years later in a couple of years. So yeah, maybe you do a sequel to part 3 and follow Kristen and Freddy comes back in her life. Maybe you could pay Patricia Arquette to come back. I doubt that you'd be able to do that, but hey, money talks, right? So yeah, maybe there's a good script. Kincaid, I just saw him actually a few years back. The guy that played Kincaid was in an episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It was driving me nuts. I was like, where do I know this guy from? He's got like a 2-minute part, and I finally was able to track it down. I was like, oh yeah, that's Kincaid. But yeah, it'd be very cool, I think, to do some kind of sequel to part 3 35 years later. However, I'm a realist. I don't really know if that would work from a logical standpoint, as far as like the studio and making money and all that shit goes. But yeah, I think at some point here you got to come up with something, because the water's hot right now. Everyone's excited for the next 2 Halloween movies, so you got to strike while the iron's hot. As far as that goes, so I really think that they need to really kind of just make a decision as far as what they want to do for Nightmare. Have the Craven estate, approve something and go from there. So let's see what you guys are talking about. Let's see what you guys think here. We're gonna go up to the top. Master of Fear says, I wonder what the real Freddy Krueger thinks about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Oh, you mean Craven's bully? Yeah, he's probably flattered, besides the fact that, his name is basically ruined and people know that he may have been a bully. He's kind of probably like a real-life Lonnie Lamb. So, yeah. Sociopath Survivor says, I actually think Freddy was even darker in part 2 than the original. I love it for that reason. I agree with you. There's so many parts in part 2 where it's just like, whoa, Freddy is dark as shit. You got the body, I got the brains. Like I said, the massacre at the pool, all the way he killed or had Jesse kill, I guess, or did Freddy kill it? I don't know. It's a little confusing there. But the way he killed the gym teacher, in the gym shower is a pretty brutal scene. So yeah, I agree that Freddy was probably his darkest in part 2. Obviously, the later sequels, are not very dark. And he was dark in part 1, but yeah, I think it was really amped up in part 2. And actually, it's interesting that at the beginning of part 2, they originally had another actor playing Freddy because they thought, like Jason and Michael, it's just some guy in a mask, just some guy in makeup. Anyone could do it. They didn't realize that Robert Englund's personality and what Robert Englund did really kind of made Freddy. Popeye 129 says Freddy lost his way after part 3. He sure did. The second you put Freddy on a beach in sunglasses, really just loses the mystique of the character. And I get what they were doing. He was he's a pop culture phenomenon at that point. Like I said, he was on kids' pajamas. It's interesting. A character that is a fucking child murderer is on kids' toys, kids' pajamas, everywhere. That just shows how big this was back then. It's just crazy how different the world is today when everyone's offended by everything. And back, 30 years ago, you got, kids idolizing this guy who's a child murderer. So yeah, I agree. After part 3, part 4 went a little bit downward slope, and then 5 and 6, just off a cliff. So I agree. Part 3 they did the perfect mix. The perfect mix of that. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Norbert Rice, how you doing? Says, really 4, 5, and 6 I think are vastly worse than Freddy's Revenge, which I actually liked. Yep, I 100% agree with you. I wish when I was younger, I would have appreciated it more. Part 2 I'm talking about. It's just kind of like same thing with Halloween 3. I didn't appreciate it at the time. At the time, I knew that Halloween 3 didn't have Michael Myers. Started watching it, as a kid. I want Michael Myers. Same with part 2. It's not really with part 2 of Nightmare. He's not really invading people's dreams. So I was like, yeah, I want the dream. I wanted a little funnier Freddy. When I was younger, when I was a kid, the first one I saw was actually part 3. When I was 5 years old. It scared the shit out of me. I didn't go in the basement for years after that. But the first one I saw was part 3. But after that, probably my favorite, the one I rewatched the most when I was a child, was probably part 4. It was just a phenomenon at that time. I mentioned the sunglasses part, but there's so many other parts to that just made it a phenomenon. One thing I didn't mention was the cockroach kill, which is actually a pretty cool scene, although I prefer the darker kills. As far as the later sequels, I really like the cockroach kill. It's pretty brutal the way the chick is working out, and she's doing a bench press, and Freddy makes her arms or her elbows come off. That always kind of gave me the willies there. But yeah, I agree that 4, 5, and 6 are definitely worse than Freddy's Revenge. Jake Blaster Productions, how you doing, man? Says, yeah, part 3 is my second favorite in the franchise. What's your first, pal? Is it the original or part 2 or probably Freddy's Dead, right? Yeah, no, part 3. I am torn all the time. I switch off between the original and part 3 as my favorite in the franchise. I'd probably say part 3, then the original, then part 2, and then then New Nightmare. Sorry. And then down the line, 4, 5, 6, and remake. Well, 4, 5, remake, part 6 would probably be my order. But yeah, part 3, it's a fan favorite for a reason. Sociopath Survivor says, I love the snakehead Freddy that eats Patricia Arquette too. Freddy took different forms in part 3. Great point, Sociopath Survivor. I forgot about that. Yes. He kind of comes through the wall as that big snake. Kind of looks like a giant penis, actually. But he's got kind of Patricia Arquette in his mouth. He's starting to eat her, like you said. And that's when Nancy kind of comes. She falls through the chair. And I love that Freddy's in snake form, and he kind of looks and sees Nancy, and he goes, you. He recognizes her. I love that scene. So yeah, Freddy taking different forms in part 3 was pretty new to the franchise, I believe. He was the snake. He was obviously the naked nurse that lured horny Joey to the other hospital room. So yeah, and of course Nancy's dad at the end. So yeah, I agree that Snakehead Freddy was pretty cool. Popeye 129 says, a big problem in this series is the many different directors diverging from Craven's initial vision of Freddy. I would agree with that. So obviously Craven's vision of this was, it was based more on realism, and then it kind of took off. And by the time Rennie Harlan, who directed part 4, came along, you had these just elaborate dream sequences, which were visually stunning. Actually, they looked really cool. Rennie Harlan actually, he did a great job. Didn't he direct Die Hard 2 as well? I think he's known for a couple other movies, big movies too. It's funny because he was actually homeless at the time that he got the part for this movie. From what I heard, and this is just what I heard, there could be other versions of the story, but he kept going to the studio begging to direct this sequel. He went like every single day just smelling like shit because he was homeless, and they finally gave him the chance. He obviously, he did a great job, but he just took it in a direction that made it so much worse. And once they saw what Rennie Harlan did, then the other directors, just took it in a complete comedic direction. You had, I can't remember too many of the other directors, but Rachel Talalay, was that her name, for Freddy's Dead? I don't know if she's ever done anything else. If she has, I guarantee you it's better than what she came up with Freddy's Dead. So yeah, I agree with you. The lack of continuity kind of hurts. Although if you think about it, Halloween doesn't, other than Rick Rosenthal, there's not too many, now David Gordon Green and then the zombies, but there's not too many directors that were the same, that did multiple movies in the Halloween franchise. Friday franchise, same thing. You had Steve Miner in part 2 and 3. But other than that, yeah. But yeah, you're right. There's kind of a correlation there. Once you get directors that kind of don't know what they're doing, the series, or all the series, kind of go downhill from there. Gary Rangel, how you doing? Says, A Nightmare 5 was a watered down movie. Was was a watered down movie. Kills were bland, except Dan's death was cool. Yep, I agree with you. Dan's death was awesome. The way the motorcycle kind of takes over his body and he's kind of half man, half machine was pretty cool. I believe was part 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was part 5 the stupid fucking comic book kill too? Super Freddy and all that shit. I think it was. So yeah, not a fan of the kills in that movie. Jake Blaster Productions says Freddy's Dead is the Halloween resurrection of the Nightmare franchise. Yes, sir, it is. I don't know too mmany people, if any, that are a fan of Halloween Resurrection, and I don't know too many people that are a fan of Freddy's Dead. Unless, you grew up with the movie. I think Freddy's Dead came out in 91. Unless you grew up with the movie and it was the first movie you saw, and that's what made you fall in love with the franchise. I understand nostalgia can really take a big, or can be a big influence on people, myself included. But I don't know anyone that's a fan of Freddy's Dead either. It's interesting too. They had a big, production as far as they had a funeral for Freddy. The mayor of LA, I believe, was going to call whatever the day in September that it came out, was going to call it Freddy Krueger Day. That's how big of a deal it was back then. And that was obviously before social media and all the internet and all kinds of shit. But yeah, I agree with you there. Sociopath Survivor says, I can't believe they were so bold to make the tagline. They saved the best for last. Yes, I forgot that was that is the tagline for that movie. My God, what the hell were they thinking? Gary Rangel says, your words are the same as Cody Leach's review. Are they? Oh, Cody's good shit. I haven't seen any of his reviews yet on Nightmare franchise, but I'll have to check them out. Sounds like we share opinions on that, at least. Sociopath Survivor, how did you feel about them giving Freddy a thumb blade? Was that in the remake? I can't remember. For some reason, I can't remember that. If that was in the remake, I must have blocked it out. It's very possible. Trying to think. Not a big fan of that look, but who knows? It's all in execution. I'd have to look at it again. Good question, though. Let's see here. Master of Fear says, yeah, most people didn't like the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Yep, I don't know anyone that really did. Unless, what's interesting though, because I'm actually not a fan of the Rob Zombie Halloween remake, which came out 2 years before the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. But I do know a decent amount of people that actually like those. But I don't see any Nightmare 09 apologists, which is probably why we still haven't gotten one. Sociopath Survivor says, I liked Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy, but I think Rooney Mara was horrifically miscast and awful. I agree with that. Like I said, Jackie Earle Haley was the least of this movie's problems. Like I said, there's always going to be people that are, wondering why Robert Englund isn't in there, why he can't be more like Robert Englund. You got to remember, this is a different movie. It's a different timeline, different world now. We're in that movie's in a world where the other Nightmare movies don't exist. So obviously they had to go a little bit of a different direction with Freddy. But yeah, I agree with you. Rooney Mara was, and I actually don't mind Rooney Mara, but she was horrible. She looked like she did not even want to be in this goddamn movie, which was frustrating. Jake Blaster Productions says, I would love to see Robert Englund play Freddy one more time. Me too, but they better do it soon. How old is Robert? Late 70s now? Maybe early 70s, but probably late 70s. You figure he was in his early 30s, I think, when the original came out in 84. It's been, 36 years since then. So yeah, probably late 70s. He looked old. I didn't see. He played. They had the Goldbergs. The Goldbergs is a sitcom, and they got Robert Englund to play Freddy for some dream sequence. This was maybe last year, and I'd realized the makeup. It wasn't a makeup that you get on a movie, but I wasn't a fan of the way Robert looked. He looked old. He looked like he put on a few pounds. Obviously, you can lose those pounds. But I agree that it would be cool to see him play Freddy one more time, pass the torch. If they do what I was talking about and would have a sequel a la Halloween 2018, if they would have a sequel to either the original or a sequel to part 3, then maybe you do have Robert come back for one more swan song, so to speak. I'm sure, Robert's obviously waffled on this throughout the last 2 years. First he said he wouldn't mind playing Freddy again. Then he says he's too old to do it. He keeps waffling on it. But I wouldn't mind seeing him play Freddy just one more time. But you got to pass the torch after that because he's just too old at this point, in my opinion. Sociopath Survivor says, I actually think Oliver Jackson Cohen could play Freddy Krueger. He was really good as the Invisible Man. Yeah, I could see that. I think whoever they get to play Freddy, I would think if they're going to reboot the franchise, I would want someone that is not, in their 50s or 60s. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, there's all this talk about Kevin Bacon playing Freddy. And as much as I know Kevin Bacon could pull it off, he's a good actor. He's got all kinds of range as villains and heroes and stuff like that, just like Robert Englund. If you're going to reboot the franchise, I want someone that's, kind of like Robert's age when it started, early 30s, not so young that, they don't have, the skills or the experience, but I would want ideally someone in their early 30s or even, late 20s, kind of do what they did with or the new It remakes with, what's his face? Bill Skarsgård. As much as, I'm not the biggest fan of the new It remakes, part 1 or 2, although I like chapter 1 better. As much as I'm not a huge fan of those, Skarsgård was the least of my issues with that, and I think he did a fine job. So maybe something like that. That's kind of what I would think. And you make a good point there that Oliver Jackson Cohen would be a decent guy. Popeye 129. Hey Nick, will you ever do a show on the Jaws movies or the Pet Cemeteries movies? Yes, Jaws for sure. That will actually be coming up very soon. As far as Pet Cemetery, yes. I'm embarrassed to say this. I haven't seen the new one yet, the remake. I had a lot going on when it came out, and I just haven't got around to seeing it. But I am a big fan of the original. I remember part 2 growing up too, just because it had what's his face, Anthony Edwards in there. Jaws for sure. Pet Cemetery, I'll say probably. As far as Jaws go, we'll probably do it on a live stream very shortly here. Like I kind of mentioned, just to kind of reiterate at the beginning of the live stream, I am going to have a lot more videos coming out. I'm going to be doing a ranking video once a week and a movie review video once a week. And it's starting immediately. So there's going to be a movie review coming out later this week, probably Thursday. And we're going to kind of stick with where we are, like what's going on in the world. For instance, it's summer, 4th of July is coming up. So my review that I got planned for Thursday is going to be a horror movie that centers around the 4th of July. It's not going to be Jaws yet, though. I'm going to save Jaws for probably a live stream just because I love it so much. So let's see who else we got here. Great Value Pancake Mix. How you doing? Great name, too. Part 4 is by far the best of the series. It was also the first one I snuck into as a kid. So I disagree as far as being the best of the series. But like I said, nostalgia, man, it plays a big role. If it's the first one you snuck into as a kid, I totally understand. Like I said, that was the movie I probably watched the most when I was younger, just because of, it being the MTV version of Freddy and my age at the time. But for me, the first 3 and New Nightmare are my favorites. Oh, Sociopath Survivor says it was a New Nightmare, the Thumb Blade. That's right. Okay, you're right. The Thumb Blade was a New Nightmare. I wasn't really a huge fan of the way it looked, but I didn't hate it. The Shape 78. How you doing, buddy? Says, hey, Nick, what do you think of the news about this week about Robert Englund wanting Kevin Bacon to play Freddy, and apparently Bacon was open to it? Shoot, I must have talked about this already, but I must be behind on the chat. So yeah, here's what I'll say about Kevin Bacon playing Freddy, just to kind of come full circle here. If they are doing the Halloween 2018 route where it's a sequel to part 1 or a sequel to part 3, and Robert Englund can't or won't play Freddy, I think then you go Kevin Bacon. That's what I would do, because kind of it's a one and done or two and done type movie. That's what I would do. But other than that, I'd go with a younger person, like I was saying. But I have zero doubt that Bacon could do it and do a great job. Shape continues. I think it would be interesting, but all I can see is Freddy doing footloose dancing. Yes, I agree. Could you imagine Freddy dancing? God, that'd be as much as I bitch about it later, it'd be kind of funny to see. Bacon does have the range, though. Like I said, if you ever seen what's it called, Hollow Man, kind of the original man, or the Invisible Man before the Invisible Man. Hollow Man, he played a good bad guy in that. Especially he started out good and played bad. Hollow Man was a good movie. I liked it. Jacqueline McEwen, how you doing, Jacqueline? Says part of my problem with the remake was that they actually made Freddy a child molester. I agree with you, Jacqueline. There's no reason to say that. The guy's killing kids. He's probably got some sick infatuation with them too. Anyway, so you don't need to say that. But yeah, I didn't like that either. Maybe it explains part of the reason why these kids are even more fucked up when we meet them. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. And Jacqueline continues and says, it's fun to cheer on a slasher killer, but you just can't root for someone molesting kids. It's uncomfortable. Agreed. Totally agreed. It's more, it's something that you kind of can, I don't want to say have fun with a child killer, but you can kind of have fun with the concept and know it's fake. But someone that's diddling kids, that's a little too real. Even though there's real child killers too. I can't really succinctly say it, but I 100% agree with you, Jacqueline. Gary Rangel says, did Robert Englund always plan for Freddy vs. Jason to be his swan song as Freddy? I don't think he did. It's just kind of the way it worked out. At the time, Freddy vs. Jason came out in 2003. So at the time, both franchises were pretty much dead, and it was kind of a comic book / love letter to fans of both those franchises. So of course Robert was going to play Freddy there. So I don't know if he planned on it being a swan song, but obviously it pretty much ended up being a swan song. Besides, playing in the Goldbergs, like I said last year. Sociopath Survivor says, for some reason I can also see Paul Bettany playing Freddy Krueger and doing a good job too. I don't know who is Paul Bettany. What is he in? You have to help me out on that, because I can't picture. Like I can. The name sounds so familiar, but yeah, I just can't put my finger on who he is right now. Popeye 129, Stir of Echoes. Bacon can act. I forgot about Stir of Echoes. That is a good movie. Yes, like I said, he's got all kinds of range. He's, like we mentioned, Footloose. I mentioned Hollow Man, Stir of Echoes. He's in some new horror movie that just came out too, or I guess you could call it horror movie, where he's some guy dating a younger chick. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's Blumhouse too that came up with it. So yeah. Gary Ringel says he plays Vision. If you're talking about Vision from the Marvel movies, yes, I actually, that's actually good. I could see Paul doing that. I think he would definitely have the range as well, and he kind of fits in with the age range that I was saying. He looks like he's in his early 30s. But yeah, I 100% agree that he would do a good job. He's obviously used to wearing makeup. He's used to emoting in makeup. I think that's an important part too. You can't just have some guy that's in makeup and you can't see his facial expressions. That's why, like I mentioned in part 2, they didn't want to pay Robert Englund after part 1. So they just had, I can't remember the guy's name, but they had someone else play Freddy, and they realized it wasn't the same. They realized it's not like Jason and Michael, where you can just throw someone behind a mask even though he's in makeup. So yeah, I 100% agree with you that Bettany would be a good choice. I never thought of that. Good thinking. Captain Brandon Horlover. Hey, Brandon says, I always thought he would play a great Dr. Loomis. you talking about Bettany or Bacon? I could see. If you're talking about Bacon, which I don't know if you are, I'm just trying to picture. I'm just trying to picture Kevin Bacon playing Dr. Loomis, and I can't. But it doesn't mean he couldn't do a great job. So yeah. Popeye says audio sounds low. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can adjust that. We're gonna go for another 10 minutes, guys. But yeah, as far as Paul Bettany, sorry about that, guys. My dog is upstairs going nuts. Okay, Captain Brandon says no, not Bacon. Okay, so you're talking about Bettany playing Dr. Loomis. Yeah, I could see that. Especially if they reboot Halloween. That'd be kind of someone you want. He's got a presence to him. Even in the Marvel movies where you got all these different characters and all these different actors. When you say Vision, I can just picture the way he kind of had a presence and he was acting. So yeah, I could see him playing a young version of Dr. Loomis. If they ever do some kind of spin-off of the Smith Grove years or anything like that. So yeah, let's see. Brandon goes on here. Yeah, he has a certain look, the English accent already, and he would look great in a trench coat. Yes, first of all, with Loomis, you got to have the English accent. It fits in just with the trench coat. So yeah, I 100% agree with you there. Which just shows how good of an actor he probably is. If we think he can play both Freddy Krueger and Dr. Loomis, that's pretty crazy. Gary Rangel says, we can only imagine Robert playing it one more time. If Tony Todd and Nick Castle can reprise their roles, England could possibly do it one more time. Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, Candyman's coming out, hopefully, soon here. And Tony Todd, I think the teaser just came out. Was it yesterday? Day before, maybe? Probably yesterday. But yeah, so Tony Todd, there was some audio that I believe Tony Todd, you heard his voice, which is pretty cool. So he's obviously going to be in there. And then Nick Castle, obviously, even though he didn't technically reprise his role completely by playing Michael Myers the whole movie, he's got a couple scenes in there. So yeah, and for marketing's sake, maybe they do something Castle-like, where they have England doing something, maybe, I don't know, maybe don't show his face completely or something, and it's England doing that, although he is Freddy. It's a little different with the makeup versus the mask, but I totally 100% agree with you that nostalgia right now is huge in horror movies, and that's why you got Castle coming back. That's why Tony Todd has come back to Candyman. Yeah, so you got all kinds of things like that. So I 100% agree with you that that Robert Englund playing Freddy one more time would be cool. I just don't think it's likely right now based on his age. Not only his age, but based on his age and the fact that we have nothing right now. Not only do we have COVID going on where they can't really do anything, even if they had something, but we would need to get what? We would need to have the Krueger estate, the Craven estate, come up with what they want to do with the franchise. We would have to have someone in their family, whoever's in charge of it, green light something, and then they would have to write it, and then they would have to cast it. Movies like that take years. And Robert, if he's in his late 70s now, which I don't think he's not. If he's not in his late 70s, he's definitely in his mid 70s or early 80s. I think we're running out of time here. So if it is going to happen, God damn it, guys, get your heads out of your asses, Craven Estate and Elijah Wood and whoever wants to do this and make this happen. Sociopath Survivor says Paul Bettany was great as the bad guy in Firewall with Harrison Ford too. He has experience as villains. Yes, I forgot about that. You are correct. Firewall was a good movie. I actually like any movie with Harrison Ford in it. But yeah, I agree. Bettany, that's a good choice. I would like to see other people's thoughts on that. See what some other YouTubers think on that, because I think you guys are right. He has the range, like you said, experience with villains, acting and makeup. I think he's got everything needed. We just got to get something moving here with Elm Street. It's interesting because all the horror, all the big three here, right now it's just all Halloween all the time. Halloween kills, Halloween kills, Halloween kills, Halloween 2018, Michael. As far as Friday the 13th, all we know right now is the lawsuit has not been settled. And I think once that is settled, I think Blumhouse is probably going to snatch that up somehow, and we'll get a Friday sequel within a couple of years. Nightmare's kind of the wild card here. Will we get another one in the next couple of years? I don't know. The fact that it's back to the Craven estate is a good sign, but I just don't know. There's a lot of Freddy fans out there that once the movie gets greenlit, or once they say they're starting to film or they're writing a script, it's going to get people excited. At one point Halloween was dead too, and it's obviously come back with a vengeance. Same thing with Friday. Friday's going to be back with a vengeance, I think. Just because we're in that nostalgia time right now. So like I said, people love all these movies from the 80s, and it's time to strike while the iron's hot. So if I'm the Craven estate, I'm starting to really get moving on this, and start to kind of flesh out what I want and things like that. So yeah, so that's going to be about it for me tonight, guys. Thank you everyone for coming and talking. You guys' questions were great. I loved some of your thoughts, like Paul Bettany and all kinds of stuff. You guys are fantastic. Like I said, look forward to more videos coming out. Subscribe to me if you haven't. I'm going to have a lot more content coming out. And thanks, guys. Have a good night.